with unit testing. I didn't add that because it just didn't fit in the whole label. But hopefully that's very explanatory of what I want to accomplish today. If you're not into proto plugins or other plugins, then this would not be a place for you to stick around. If you're wondering about it, please stick around. So, hopefully Star Wars will finish at some point in time. Awesome. So, a little about myself before I get started. I'm a 9-time Microsoft MVP. I started on what was the genesis of the Power Platform, Microsoft CRM, back in 2011. And been working in there since then as a developer, developing Dataverse plugins, essentially in Dataverse JavaScript and Canvas stuff. I've been doing that since 2011. So, a long time here. So, anyway, I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I work for myself. I'm a freelancer, and I am an XRM Toolbox contributor. Who has heard of the XRM Toolbox? Okay. Almost most of you, okay. I mean, you've used it, you've heard of it, I'm assuming that. Who has used the first tool out there, the Attribute Manager? Who's used the Attribute Manager? Wow, okay, so very little compared to those that use it. So that's a tool if you want to convert like a local object set to a global object set, change the field type. It does those kind of nasty things. So that's a great tool to check out. Early bound generator. Just use the early bound generator. Okay, I've got 3 friends in here. So that's been one of my tools that I'm going to show a little bit of in the presentation today. That's the thing with your coding in Dataverse. Since every Dataverse environment is unique, it's really helpful to have the IntelliSense in your coding. So that's what the early bound generator does. It generates your local, your type classes based on your Dataverse environment. And then this one, I guess maybe no one has used because it's not quite as well known. The Visual Studio Solution Accelerator. It's a bit long, but maybe it's used that before. Okay, great. This is awesome. So this basically is going to be the main kind of tool to help get started, help get things going. So I originally worked for Power Objects back in the day before I started working for myself. And every single project we were starting on, they create a new project and they name it Power Apps or Power Objects Exploit or whatever. And I got kind of annoyed by that because if you were going to have a shed built in your lawn, you don't pay the guy to build the shed and put his name on the shed. You want your name on the shed, right? Same thing with like your own IP. You have someone come in to build something for you. It should have your name, not their name, because you pay for it basically. So that was kind of the genesis of that. That's just how I set that up. And so yeah, I kind of created that, and it's open source, so I have able to reuse it and edit it. And I just recently updated it to allow for some newer features in the Proto side of things. So that's that. Actually, unit testing framework. I'll show a little bit of that today, but it's far too much to dive into in an hour session. And finally, I have a podcast I did with Scott Durrell, who was speaking at the first session here this morning. Green here. He and I have been for a couple years. I was Joan Surratt, who is the creator of the fact checks from the So if you are looking for a nerdy podcast where they talk about developing things on the Power Platform as well as tools for the Power Platform, check it out. I recommend it. Okay, so actually before I dive into behind the curtain, a few more questions. Who here is a C# developer? Okay, so we have all those guys who already have the tools in order to actually create a plugin, and everyone else is trying to get into it. Maybe they are thinking about maybe getting somebody else into it, I'm guessing. So that's great. Then who has created a Dataverse plugin in full? Alright, so so hopefully you guys won't be surprised when you think everyone else that this would be a great experience to see kind of what's involved with it and how easy it can be if you have some frameworks lined up. So finally, for those that are using Dataverse plugins, who have used the dependent assembly plugin feature? Okay. There we go. I feel pretty good. So previously, you could only create your own code. You couldn't reference any other DLLs legally. Approved by the platform. We always use file merge to merge into plugin DLLs if you needed and upload that. And Microsoft always said it wasn't supported, and that Barbara, the PM, was always kind of yelling at us for doing that, and I never had a problem with it. But the good news is now Microsoft has released the dependent assembly plugins feature, and that does allow things to be to pull in DLLs and use them on the platform. So that's great. So that'll be a part of the plugin process as well. You have to use that the tool and it sets it up that way. So that's great. So first I'm going to do behind the curtain. I've got 2 slides, so if you want the slides, you can take a picture of this one, you can take a picture of the next one. That's all. Everything else after that's going to be coding. And I'm not planning to use any AI or Copilot stuff, so if you need a break from that, this is your safe place. The getting on Copilot Visual Studio may suggest something, and it may be exactly what I need, and so I will probably accept that. So that's I guess that didn't manage to lead itself in here. But, so all I've done so far, to set this up, is I've created a Dataverse solution with my publisher, and that's required for when we are deploying the plugin. It needs a solution so that it accepts the publisher and use the publisher prefix there. So if you try to create a table in Dataverse, same publisher prefix, same thing for the plugin. The next thing is I use PPCC. Don't kind of cry every time you see that. PPCC is what's the acronym for PPCC? What's the acronym for PAC? RFs, command line, right? Okay, so it's CLI, which is RFs, command line, interface, command line. My own OCD issues with that, but it sounds better to say PPCC off than just PAC off. But anyway, so I created the PAC off, which is just a connection to my pages, and I named it, so that way I can reference it. I've done ahead of time on that. I've installed my XRM toolbox and my tools, the Visual Studio Solution Accelerator, Early Bound Generator V2, and the plugin registration tool. For those of you that haven't used the XRM toolbox, xrmtoolbox.com, download that. You can watch 50,000 YouTube videos on how to use it because it's like the tool, or even as one of Windows, for the Power Platform for computers. So, then finally, I created a connection from XRM toolbox to my environment. So many of you that have XRM toolbox already have this already done if you haven't installed the tools from the store. So, okay, so that's behind the curtain. That's the only setup I've done for it. That's the only magic. So, like, man, I won't be able to do this when I leave because I don't know what he's all done. Here's it. Not a very hard list. Okay, and then these are the tools that I'm going to use. So I'm going to use my plugin I mentioned, or plugins. PPCC XRM, that's my C# coding framework that I've been developing over the last decade and a half almost. So it's just, whenever I see something that makes life easier, I go and add it and add it and add it. It's a NuGet, it's open source, you can download it, you can copy it, you can do whatever. I try to make the license as open as possible because I want anybody to be able to use it, and if there's some reason they can't use it, then I don't want them to be so that's there. Same thing in XRM unit test, that's a testing framework I've used. If you've used fake XRM easy, same thing that happened. We created about the same time. We just didn't know it because Jordan and I would not decide that we liked it. And then, oh, you created this too? Oh, it's basically the same thing? Oh. And he does really, really good at documentation. And so he's kind of took off because people knew how to use it. And mine isn't quite as good at documentation, so I didn't get as much buy-in into it. So it's my friend, so I'll show that. And then plugin registration tool, mentioned that, PPCC. Visual Studio. This one, I use it for a really small thing. I mean, I didn't use it depending on what we actually do today, because it's actually, you are actually in charge of what we're going to do today. So that's kind of freaky for me as a presenter to really do your hand, and you'll see everyone else is playing with Copilot and knowing for work. I'm depending on you guys, all right? So what I am depending on you guys for is I need to know a couple things, and we'll walk through that. But one thing I want you to kind of think of is I need to know you plug in what we want to plug in into, okay? Some caveats. It's basically got to work with out-of-the-box entities, contacts, accounts, and such. And it's got to be something that I can do in a reasonable amount of time. It's not, hey, I want you to go integrate with Salesforce or whatever. It's probably going to have to be completely within in there. So the point of this feature is not to show you everything you can do with Dataverse plugins, because you can do a lot of stuff. That's a 2-minute timeout. Any code you execute has to happen within 2 minutes. And then if you're going to call externally, there's some rules about what you can do to make external calls. You can't have IP addresses. And so to get it out of a 2-minute timeout, usually people call to Azure functions, since they can do these long running out there, and you're going to have to use it. So yeah, that's kind of the framework of what we're about. So with that, that's the end of the actual slideshow. So you pay for that. And let's open up XR tools. I can't get the text any bigger because it's a win form, but hey, it's my win form, so I'll have to live with it. But what this says here is I want to add the accelerator isolation libraries to a solution. And then the next two are add a plugin workflow project to an accelerated solution or install snippets. So this whole accelerator thing, all this is doing is adding some projects to your solution, or it's creating a brand new solution. You don't already have one. These are .NET solutions, Power Platform solutions. And yeah, so the first step is just going to add these shared libraries and set up specific connections to it, and some other groundwork stuff like that. And then the second step is if you want to keep on adding more plugin assemblies, you can go through it, you can plugin assembly, you can go through and wire it up and work from that. And then the final one is snippets. Those are just some quick little things I do to make my life easier, because sometimes when you stare at a blank screen, it's really hard to know what the next step is. So if you have a snippet, even if that snippet's long, it's almost better than nothing, because you just get kind of get going with that. So that's if you are on the team, you have multiple developers, someone new comes on, hey, I want the tool and install a snippet, and then you've got a snippet on your machine. Those are just files that in my documents under Visual Studio's there's nothing special about that. So I'm going to do this first step here, and let's go ahead and execute. All right, so this first question here is, let's zoom in a little bit. Do you want to add the D and the B accelerators to an existing solution? So if you already have a solution, you may go and plug this in and see what this looks like. You can do that, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to actually pick a solution path. Here's our first question we're going to have. We need a fictitious name of a company to use. So we should spend fun if we do that, because this is writing code. We try to get as far as we can, because we are spending our entire life rearranging ones and zeros in a very particular order. So let's as much fun as we can. So anybody have an example of a fun company name? So we got
Bad engineering.
Bodge and
Bad engineering.
Bad engineering. Okay, bad engineering. Bot badge. Bodge.
Monster like throat together.
Botched.
Botched. Botched. Botched.
Bad.
Badge. Something to someone that can spell. Anybody else has another example, or we'll go with the spelling now?
Undermount was confused.
Confused engineering, we can do that. Okay, so I'll be confused. Confused. I'll just call it confused. We're confused. We are the confused company. My own personal preference is Dataverse to get a nice solution. Do whatever you want. But that is, and it gives a little description in here of kind of what this is. So you're going in here and saying, what is this doing? You can kind of have some help there. So root namespace, I just saw my ethics confused as what we had there before, so that's good. If you want to change it, you can. Do we want to use the early bound generators? This generates our early bound typing. It makes this easier to develop with and safer. And yes, cool. And then this is the shared assembly. So we're going to create a shared assembly to put all of our shared plugin code. So this is not designed to be your Microsoft documentation. Here's how you create a plugin. That's designed to do a minimum amount of work to keep you a plugin, but it doesn't really set you up for long-term success, right? What happens if I want to create another plugin? Well, now I've got to duplicate code because maybe I don't have shared classes, and how do I do that? So that's kind of what this is all wiring up for you. And then, do you want to use some unit testing? Yes, I do. Great. And this has a shared project as well, so we want that name to be. We'll leave the default confused Dataverse test. We do want to create a plugin project. We'll leave it as confused Dataverse plugin. And then this does give you an example to include example classes. So it will give you like 4 or 5 plugins. And, hey, this is how this works. This is how that works. This is how this works. If you just want to see what it is, and you can automatically start debugging it, if you have XM tool, I have the XM unit test set up for it. For now, we'll just make it simple and turn that off. So that's something you can play with. The actual solution itself is on GitHub under my D2D or XRM unit test examples. This is the project up there. So it's out there. You can go look at it without having to go install this tool if you want to. So next. Okay, so now we come to something that I recently added. This is the whole dependent assembly stuff. This is kind of questions we need for that. But if you have any need to change in this thing, we'll leave the company name as confused. The description, if we want to create a different description, we can do that. But we are going to change the solution to that plugin solution. This is the solution I created prior to this. So this is the Heiner curve stuff. So create the plugin. That'll inherit my correct publisher, and it'll inherit my correct publisher. Then finally is that auth name. So I don't do very well with naming things, so I just call it Daryl Dev. So I'm going to deploy to Daryl Dev. So this is where, when we build our plugin, it's where it's going to automatically get pushed to using that pack CLI. Alright. And then what do I need the name of the test project to be? I will keep the default, confuse that Dataverse, that plugin, the tests. Do I want to create a workflow project? Workflow projects do not allow for the shared assemblies. So there's additional kind of work that's involved with that. Workflow projects they're kind of on the way out. They're trying to replace those and support the way as possible. Microsoft is so unless you have a real reason to use a custom workflow, somebody probably want that. Hey, it's in there. And then finally, do we want to install snippets? Yes. And then do we want to add the snippets to the solution? I wrote the snippets and I forget what the shortcuts are, so I add them to the solution just so I go, okay, this is what I'd like to move to going here. So I will include that there as well. Then that's it. We're going to finish it. And it's going to run out and it extracts out the little solution that it has that's built into the tool and pushes it to the correct directory. It goes through and sets up the correct early bound generator settings to say, hey, where do I want to create these files? What project are they in? And as well as it's going out and publishing a dummy plugin to the environment. So that way, when you are actually building our plugin, you have a plugin ID reference and it can work in there. All right, so now it's finished everything, and this is a warning to say, hey, we're going to automatically open up the early bound generator to generate our early bound types. So everything's been configured, but if you want to go through and maybe you know you've got a couple other things you want to add, you can go ahead and add it here. And right now we're just creating an account, business unit, contact, and user objects, class objects. So here's the point where I put it off as long as I can. And also point we need to kind of figure out what we want to plug in to do. Do you have any suggestions of something that we want to plug in to do? I've got one as a backup. Go with the backup. All right.
Can you say, every time you create a record, that you change the ownership, the owner, the creator to their default team?
So you want to change the owner when you create the record to the default team. Okay. I'm wondering if that's possible. Last time I changed with owners, I think there was something that it didn't like actually updating the owner in the pre-end to do that into the post. Okay. That might be an idea. Anybody else have any other ideas? All right, we got over here.
Create a child record.
Create a child record. All right. And that's just create a child record for automatically.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay, so when you create a particular record, you want to take a previous value field, and so that was the previous value. So it was you got to do 812 for now. It's 812. That's the previous value. Right. That's pretty cool. Well, one more on the cool vote.
Like add a record to another table, that's like a pointer table, that would include users or contacts. So when you create a user or create a contact, it goes in this pointer table that then links to the, like a multi-table.
You're adding join from one record to another record through another. All right, it might be a good one.
I still do what your backup was.
Okay, my backup is out of the box. If you are working with, I'm also going to PPCC. If you're working with the out of the box duplicate detection engine, it only works on a field by field basis. So if I happen to have an email address in field 1 that happen to be Daryl@Devery.com, and I happen to have another record with email address 2 Daryl@Devery.com, it will not find the duplicates because it's in a different field. So I'll write a small plugin that says every time the email address is populated, go and check to see if there's any other duplicates in any other field and throw an error if there is. So that was my backup. So what do we can vote on what we want. Do we want to do that one? Do we want to do one of the other ones?
Putting some DLP policies.
I'm going to be done accepting ideas. I got one that I have to read. So. Anybody had the creating the previous value field debate? Okay, got 1, 2. All right, we have the creating a joining record. Okay. All right, that one I don't necessarily want to do as much rotates record. I have to create 4, so I'm timing them, kind of running in here. And then we had, what was the other one?
Yours.
Mine. Okay, everyone do mine. You're so excited! Yes. Oh man, that was we had one more, right? We had a great child record. We want this great child record.
And change the ownership
I'm changing order. I'm not changing order. Okay.
Yours plus creating an extra record for the.
Okay, I'll do mine, and then we'll add it if we got time. Let's do it. Okay, cool. So I will leave what I got here as far as the entities I need to create. I will click the generate, so go out and read all the metadata in the system, and automatically.
Early route generation completed successfully.
I forgot that was connected. It talks to you if you do that, do not. I have multiple people that have commented and said, this thing scared me half to death when I was coding. And they started talking to me. So it used to take in the V1 of this tool, it took like a minute sometimes to generate. So click the button, go away, do something. Microsoft created a better tool in the back end. I use that one. Now it runs much faster. So maybe you can actually turn them off. It's configuration because people ran it on some server that had like a sound card and an error. So all the fun things that you have in the tools. Okay, so that's done. So let's go ahead and open up our solution. So Dataverse.solution. So this is the Visual Studio solution. And normally I am a black background developer, but today I'm going to be white for everyone, so you can hopefully see it a little bit better. We'll see we've got a couple of different projects that have been created. We have a continuous.dataverse project. So this is going to contain all of our early run entities. So it's designed to be reused amongst every single plugin. So it's shared code goes in there. We have our actual plugin itself, and then we have a unit test for that plugin, and then we have a shared unit testing project. So that's all it's got created. This used to be a little more complicated. We had to share projects and get around the IO merge stuff. It's been a little bit more simplified with that. These are also the .NET SDK style projects, so you can open them up and look at the actual code behind it if you want, just like what we got. Which is kind of a feature. So if I open up my plugin project, we see it's empty. We don't have a plugin. So let's go ahead and create this plugin. Create a class here. And I'm going to call it email enforcer. Enforcer plugin. Oh, let's see. Alright, email enforcer. So right now it's just a basic class here. What I'm going to do now is use that first snippet that I talked about. There's several snippets here. One of the snippets called Serum plugin. So it's kind of fills out the basic plugin. I'm going to copy and enforce what we said. Include some using statements that are needed, just to make life simpler, and then we can see kind of what we have here. So first thing we have here is we have our constructor. They are configuration objects. You can register on the plugin itself, and those need to get passed into the constructor. So that's what these secure and unsecure configs are. If I remember how to do that, I don't. It's okay, I'll just underline it. Those get passed to the base plugin, and you can access them from there. This is kind of unique to my stuff, this create events here. This is used to either skip execution or particularly to use a specific method that you want to execute. So a very simple example is, let's say I have the same plugin that runs against contacts and accounts. And against contacts, I need to run this method, and against accounts, I want to run this method. By default, you have to put an if statement in your execute, say, hey, if it's a contact, I'm going to do this, if it's that, and do that. This you can just declare, hey, if it's a contact, call this method, if it's an account, call that method. So, and then we have our execute internal, and this is, by default, the iPlugin interface that we actually implemented here. It gives you an execute method. That's all it gives you, is an execute method. So, the plugin basis grabs that, and just even some dependency injection, if anyone's used that before, version control kind of stuff. So it does lots of stuff in there, as well as creates this little extended plugin context, which gives you a lot more features out of the box than what you get with standard context in the plugin. So we aren't needing that, so we delete that. So we are going to run this thing on the pre-operation, so this is before the database transaction has occurred, and we want to be able to do this with create and update. And then also want to do this for entities, we're going to do it for the contact. So I'm going to use, so that's just saying, hey, preparation, create update, and for the contact. If anybody's using Scott Burrow's Sparkle framework, very similar to that. Just what I came up with back in the day when I was doing it, and it does some other features as well. But just makes it easy for that. Also, I use something interesting as well. I'll show you that later. So let's get the actual plugin itself. So now I'm going to copy paste. Just kidding. Do that. Actually, this is kidding. All right. So first thing we're going to do is we need to get the target of the context. And the target here is going to be our contact. Okay. So this is the actual data on what's changed, what field changed. Let's go ahead and get the email out. We'll just grab the first one for now. And this is where the early bound, so email is one. If you didn't have early bounding, you could do a late bound, doing this like target, email address one. But if you happen to have a single mistake, or you happen to cast it the correct type, it just do it. So like our email, right? Okay, so we have the mail address. So first what we want to do, we only want to have this happen if it is populated. If it's not populated, they can delete as many emails as they want. That's probably wrong. Empty mail. So if it has a mail, email address. Confusing? Alright, so now what do we need to do? First thing we need to do is we need to go and query the database to say, this exists. Right? So I'm going to create a query expression with that. You can create query expressions for fetch XML. I happen to like query expressions more. I've also added a lot of extension methods that exist in the D with the library I talked about earlier that make it a little bit less verbose. So it's pretty verbose here. So we're going to find the duplicate if it exists. System organization service. You know that you can type in like just the capital letters and it should all up to the whole earth. Save years of time. Okay, so we're getting the system organization service. This is running with the system privileges rather than user privileges. And we are going to get the first or the false. Right. Contact. Great. And then we don't need any sort of single link expression something. Something else. So we need a new concept that is empty. We want to be as performant as we can. If you were here for David Yak's session before with the low-code plugins, you mentioned, hey, if you need all the performance, then you need to stick with pro-code, where we can be very specific about what are we actually returning, what are we actually going to use, and that kind of stuff. That may come down the line for low-code, for now it's not quite there. So I would need to get that. And then also, I don't want to get myself if I exist, right? So let's go ahead and write a new condition for that. So condition expression, expression line, that's nice, yeah. And then, so we need the actual contact ID. Does not equal condition operator. Not equal. Now we go to our target ID. Right? So that's the ID of our target. So it's up there. Alright. So that's the first thing we want to do. And the next thing is we want to check to see, is there an email one record that exists? Okay. So do that. Contact. And then, although this is early bound does give you all the column names as well. And yes, here's one fancy thing. 90% of queries that we write are equal to statements. So this is set up to just automatically assume that's equal to. I'm a lazy developer, I hate typing stuff. Anyway, we have like you don't have to do this. Okay, so then we also need to do it for the other ones as well. So let's do it for OI. And then we can actually copy and paste this. Or again. So now we're at email address 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so I can clean this up a little bit more, but now this will fine. That's our duplicate. So if it exists, we have an issue, right? So if the duplicate exists, we have to error. So if the duplicate is duplicate, then we throw an error. Email already exists. Just say email already exists. And then let's actually list the email here as well. So email. How about a contact? Already exists. Because we need an explanation. That should be our plugin. It's the first attempt at it, at least. And then, first thing we should do is we should test it before we actually deploy it. Because that's what we should be doing, right? It's testing. So let's go ahead and create a new class as well. Actually, I'm going to copy the name of this just to save some time. To the test project here. Class. My naming convention is the name of the class I'm testing about tests, because why not, I guess. So I've created that. And then I'm using the next step here, which is the, actually I'm going to just I'm going to use this test because it's already built in on the download. So I'll use that, and that's assigned method, class. Get that right, the bar. There we go. All right, so now comes my next thing here. So that's the kind of longer CRM test method class. Okay, so here's a whole lot of code all three here. So first, these aren't strictly unit tests, these are really more integration tests, because it actually has the ability to write in the same plugin locally on my local version, in-memory external unit test, or against the server. You provide the credentials and we'll go connect there, run against the server. The reason this is awesome is there will come a day when, for some reason, another environment is not working. The plugin's failing for some reason. And what do? Well, if you have the credentials connected to the server, you can just log in, look for unit tests, find the test for that one plugin, connect to the server, run, it'll clean up everything it needs beforehand, or create everything it needs beforehand, and clean it up afterwards so that you don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit overhead, but I won't put that. It isn't a lot of power. So let's see, state being tested. Duplicate email. We have a duplicate email. We should go ahead. I'm sure we'll see it. Should go. And then I'm going to change this real quick because just rename two things. My OCDs. Okay. So this is the actual test method. It's just calling a class, calling it a test method. The reason for that is it's setting up a unique instance of the external unit test per every single one of these classes, and allows you to run in multi-thread if you need to for trying to be fast and things. So first thing I'm going to do is we will need an existing contact to go query. So I need to define a contact. Now if I, this is where I use the link pad here. All this does is you can type in whatever types you want, and click run, it'll generate these little GUIDs. Use copy paste in here. It really isn't that much at all. It's very, very minor. There's no reason to type that by hand. But again, I'm lazy. Sometimes I test where I need 10 or 15 different entities created, and so it makes that very simple. So anyway, this is just a way to ensure that that doesn't exist before the plugins run, and it gets cleaned up after the plugins run, right? So that way I run the environment, I don't have to test data sitting on the environment, populating or including the environment. All right, so there's all the enough here to help initialize the test data. So we need to give this thing some emails. So anybody have any examples of some fun emails we can do on this thing? Is this like the factor email? Anybody else have that? Yeah? Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, you know. I want to settle that too. You guys are the most creative people I've ever talked to. CEO, yes, CEO at let's see, we were at Confused, right? So that's kind of the fun thing. I actually sent an email to every single person in the company when I was 3 years out of college. CEO, everybody, telling them their laptop at the West of the time. So that's the importance of not having production emails in your non-production database. Ensuring you don't send out emails. All right, then third one. Anybody else?
PPCC.
Okay, all right. Let's call that. All right, so we got 3 email addresses, great, they're unique. Now we have our actual, what we normally think is our unit test is our plugin test here. So I have a CRM plugin test snippet, just to kind of make our lives a little simpler here. Let's not go out. Let's do the. Everyone uses the Windows Clipboard Manager that's all there to be able to keep track of history of clipboards. If you haven't used that, I'm missing out, because how many times have you copied something, and then actually copied something else, and oh crap, I need to think I copied twice ago, that's this Windows key copy paste, option to use, so it's a ability to go through previous programs. So if you ever use those built in, turn it on, and move on for life. So, so we create the plugin. The plugin needs a context, so it's passed into the plugin through a service provider. So, in the context, we need a target here, so let's create a target. And then we need let's actually create an email here first. Use it here, see that later. Email equals, let's do the first thing. IDs, contact, so we're going to the very first email and set up our email. And then we will go ahead and set the email address 1 to be, actually not heard that's. So we'll do, let's match this one. And we have a target. Let's go ahead and add it to our context here. So this little plugin execution context really gives you lots of fun ways to inject what you want into your test here. So we'll target and then test the target. And I think that's about it, because that's about all we need in here. So we're going to do that. And then at the end, so this isn't a normal assert because the happy path for this test is that it arrows, right? So there's a couple ways you can do this in a plugin test. I'll just do kind of the more natural way if you aren't used to plugins, which is just a try catch. We'll do a var succeeded. Here, succeeded. And if we don't throw an exception, it succeeded should be false. That makes sense. And then we have and we should say all right, and then move to the search. That is true. That we succeeded. All right. Hopefully that's not too complicated for non-developers in the room, non-C# developers in the room. So, so let's go ahead and just give that a little test here. See if we are barking up the right tree. Cool. All right, successful. Here's another really powerful thing for those of you that don't unit test. How many times have you wanted to debug your plugin? You had to go in and attach the debugger and kind of stand there and unit test, you can step in, grab a plugin with your code base, and instantly have the code there that you're debugging and run your stuff through. So if you haven't run a unit test before, do it. You can save you a lot of time. All right, so that did the first one. Let us go through and do the second one here. All right, so that's the first email. Let's call this. All right, so this was the first email address. Let's do this for 2 and 3, just to make sure that we're all working here. All right. So I'm going to do the same test, but I'm going to use the second email address in the first field, the third email address in the first field. Theoretically, I should go through and, well, I'm really supposed to try putting it in the second field, in the third field, or I guess we can do that too. But for now, we'll just leave it this way. And I only got 20 minutes left, so I'm going to make sure we're good. Okay, so that passed, it looks good. So I've done my unit tests, I'm happy that what I have works, let's go ahead and deploy it. So this is something that I just have figured out how to do recently, and it's kind of fun. So I have a dev deploy solution built here. And now when I go ahead and publish or build this plugin, it's going to automatically push to my dev environment with that pack-util credentials that I set with that tool earlier. So you see it's built the package, it's gone through and it's now pushing the plugin and update the plugin package. Can't zoom in. I guess if I zoom in and pause this, I can do that too. It's right there. Then should be done soon. Cool, done. Alright, so that got pushed, and now I can go ahead and add some registration for it. I'm going to use the registration tool. This is loading all the plugin assemblies in the environment. If you ask, does Microsoft use plugins? Yes, they do. It's one of those theirs. Except for it's confused them at the very top. So now we're going to register a new step here. This is going to be on create for the contact. Alright. And we can specify particularly what columns we want to actually check for. So I'm thinking one was 1, 2, and 3. Alright. We're going to do this on pre-create, so I like to say create from that. This one I'm going to run as the actual system rather than the user just because it makes life simpler for me. And pre-operation rather than post-operation because we want this to not create a database and then have to roll it back and know it sooner rather than later. You could also do it in pre-validation. Sometimes pre-validation doesn't run, which can catch you. If you are running this as a plugin, pre-validation has already ran and triggers the plugin to run. That pre-validation step won't run because the transaction has already started. And so that can catch you. So as awesome as it sounds to do pre-validation work in the pre-validation step, you have to be careful because it won't always run depending on certain situations. Okay, so we registered that for the create, and now we need to do basically the same exact thing for the update. Here, contact, and again, we want to do email addresses 1, 2, and 3. Again, it's a pre-update. System. Okay, so now I've got my 2 plugin steps here. So let's go and actually test and verify that yes, this does actually work and that I didn't pull the wool over your eyes. Let's refresh that. Okay, cool. So let's see what contacts I have in here. Alright, I have to test my contacts. I already tested here, so that's good. We can try it again. So this one is in email address 1, I believe. Yep, okay. So we can go and test one. So let's create a new contact here. Do it. Alright, so test. Here's something interesting as well. So let's say there's something that you're trying to use the out-of-the-box duplicate detection rules, and you'll see that pop up here. Hey, we found a duplicate, which is great. They can click ignore and save, but if that causes some catastrophe to your system, that's good because we actually do our plugin now, just trigger it and say, hey, contact all of our users. So this is our plugin error, and you can see we have some information here with the exception. We actually get the query that we ran. So that's part of the DLB libraries that we use. We'll actually spit out the SQL-ish query from the query expression, which makes life really easy when you're debugging. So I'm missing this or missing that. See how long it took? 0.015 seconds. That's a powerful coarseness. Even like I said, 0.605 for the whole plugin. So that's the database retrieve, come back, everything else. So it can be very, very fast. And then you see the cost here. We also get to see everything that's in our event context. So it's pre-operation, create, contact, there's a bunch of GUIDs as far as the IDs. And then you can see the target of all the values that were sent in. So all these targets were sent in. This is the one you're looking at, this one. And again, all that information is sitting there in the error log, which is very helpful as well. Okay, so didn't work in that field. Let's see if we do it again. So now we'll come to the point of the plugin where we won't see the duplicate detection because the duplicate detection doesn't know that it's a different field. Except it just worked. Oh, okay. What did we mess up on? That's why we need to test and figure it out. Because that was it should throw an error. And it should do it in the second email address. What's the second? So we'll do that first.
Carol, did you check the second email address?
Did I check the second email address in the plugin? Oh. No, okay, cool. Yeah, so this is where I said, hey, maybe we should go through and do that testing. We should have done the testing. We'll do the testing, we'll find the error, fix the error. That's what we really should be doing. If you ever have something that's broken in prog, write a test, and that way you keep having in the future. So I did that just an example for you guys here. So we're going to So we wanted to check email address 1, or store email address 1 value from that one. Actually, it's there we go. So build on all, you can do that kind of stuff, which is kind of cool. You guys can do that. And then RG2, okay, so we're gonna say, take that email address and store it into this value. And that was the iteration. And then I just need to add 2 here, so this is the string email field. Email column, so the columns, column. And whether it's being early bound, late bound. Alright, so now I'm going to test that. This is basically saying, hey, I want to try what happens if I store it in 1, what happens if I put it in 2. And this right here is what we just tried. What happens if I store it in email address 2 for contact, not 1, you see we do an error. Hey, error, why did an error? Well, because demo a few times to make sure I'm good at it. And I didn't add in this one, so it's an issue here. I need to create this as a method where I search email and I pass an email. That's what it is. Right? So now this is going to do check email address 1, check email address 2, check email address 3, make sure that they're all the same. You could clean up this query and be a little more efficient. Do the query once rather than multiple times. So an equals, do like an in. For now, I'll leave that. I'll do like that. I don't like nested ifs, so I would be OCD about it. But, it doesn't matter. If I'm 20 people, that's okay. And then that's a help. So now I can go run this. I fix the problem. Yes, everybody's happy, great. So now I can go and deploy. And I just need to go and change this to deploy. Version number and the rest of it. Don't do this to Rob. This is only really for data deployments. Just talk about that side. You should be able to make that process so you can doing the actual deployments from Rob or something else. But this idea of your local, your own test environment, yeah, that's what we're doing. All right, that already finished. That's good. So let's go out and give it another shot. Oh, we already created don't do it as a duplicate. Let's remove it and save it. We can test that this way, I guess, as well. All right, so let's going to try to save that to the others. All right, cool. We have an error in there as well, and you can do all 3 in one. You're only going to get 1 error. But we have to do 2, so we have 1 today, and then we have 1 email. So that error is not the first time, it doesn't check it. And that's pretty much all that was needing to show today. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we can either go through and do questions, or we can play some more with plugins, or we can call it a day. It's up to you guys. So any votes? What do we have in front?
I have a question.
Yes.
So let's say if you have custom data that you create in Dataverse, how do you bring that object over to your code? In this case, the context is already there.
So if you create a new custom table, how do you bring that into the code? Yeah, cool. So that's all the early bound logic that I have set up. So if you got 2 options, you can do the late bound, which is back to this. So this is just a string. And all you do is RFT equals UNT. And we put the name of that, what this is, on my custom table. And if you want early binding on it, you just go open up the early bound generator and select that table. Hey, I want to generate titles for it. You're ready to come out to your code.
Way over my head.
Okay.
Do you have any resources online that would get me from a beginner to where we were today?
So part of it, you kind of have to think to make it get going. Is the question how do I deploy a plugin? Or is the question is how do I make it? Because a lot of this was how do I build, how do I test, how to deploy a plugin, versus how do I just write a plugin?
Yeah, I think that's.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so if you like looking at code, I can do that example as well. So that's so this is the basic project that has some test plugins in here. So for instance, let's see here. It's kind of complicated. Same concept to account. Here's just an example of plugins of what you can do in there. So this is just the GitHub repository that if you choose create example plugins in the Visual Studio Solutions Accelerator, it brings in these plugins, and you can step through those and dive into that as a coder again. And it helps with figuring out what's going on here. That helps. So here's just another example of what's going on. This is a sync contact to account. So it takes the contact information and just copies it over to the account that's associated. So that's an example of what this is doing. Skip that section here, which is just the execute return like I would go get the target, which we just did. Go through and get my connection to Dataverse, and actually I use it link to Dataverse. Like really like using it to do that. Get the account from there, there's the address. Here's the address account. Set all the values. So there's a couple of examples there as well. A great resource. My problem is I've been doing this so long I forget what I don't. What's the hard part? So a great Discord place for everyone. If you are in Discord, highly recommend checking out the Power Platform level of Discord group. If you don't know what that is, ping me. I will send it to you. That's what I'm talking about. It's a really great place for developers to ask questions and learn from people, as well as whatever you can find. GitHub will actually, Copilot will actually help you pretty well too.
What see, like, this is gonna be a total new question. What languages can I write a plugin in?
So you can write anything .NET, so it's like VB and C# pretty much. What? Oh, PO400. Oh yeah. So yeah. Yeah. So starting from example, PO400 would be good if you want to look at it and see that information.
Okay.
Okay.
So, in a modifying kind of trigger, how would you specify which fields you modify the trigger? Like, does that happen here in the code, so it will still trigger, but be short-circuited?
Right. So the question is, how do I just declare the fields that I want this into to trigger? So that one will do that kind of fast here, and I apologize, but in the plugin registration on the plugin step here, there are the filtering attributes right here, and you list the fields that you actually care about triggering. If the email address 1, 2, or 3 are not updated, it won't execute the plugin. The end here?
Can you show us how you set up that field configuration for that? Like, you're just updating the plugin directly, right? When you run your.
Oh, when I run it locally, when I run it against the server?
Yeah, normally, like, we have to go into the registration rules and application details from there.
So for that, no, I actually run this, I run the plugin locally, but any data calls go to the server. Does that make sense? So anytime I do any higher service requests, it goes to the server from the local machine. So the way that you set that up, and I didn't do that for this demo, but if you need to, when you, in this shared test project, there's a unit test settings.config file, that's what gets checked in. And that's, you can type in all your connections in your environments. You want any new dev coming to the platform, or if there's a machine that's in there. And then your actual, password credentials go in this user.config. It automatically creates a gate ignore file to make sure this file isn't being checked in. And then in here, you put in whatever credentials you want. And all you do is you change this use local CRM database to false, save it, and now it's running as a server. Good question. Right here. So I don't do anything with that because there's really not much to show. It actually gets taken by default. So in the plugin itself, in here you have to reference. So I have a section here. Let's see this right here. Yeah. So you have to reference this PowerXMS build plugin in your assembly, and as well as that, you need. Where is the? Where's the build? that one as well to set up the actual code as well. So with those things added to the project templates, so those are the things that are used. Basically, this whole section here is kind of what you need to do with dependent assemblies.
That was just gonna check box,
There is no, it automatically does it for you. So there's not a checkbox for dependent assemblies or not. It won't do it for workflows, because those are support. But this is how you do that. There's a simple Microsoft Docs on how you actually do it. So I'm going through a copy in here. So I went through and kind of defined that here. That's for this. This is for your new packages that you need. This is the reference for the projects. And then here is the logic that's used to automatically build deploy to your dev environment. So if you already have a plugin, hey, I want to add to here, you pretty much copy and paste this into your project and then set up the build and build. Next.
I have a question on performance optimization.
Okay.
We did find that with local no-code, we have a bit of a trade-off that it makes developing products more accessible, but then it's not as optimized sometimes in terms of performance. With when you're coding it from scratch, of course, you have more flexibility to customize your optimization for performance.
Okay.
I was wondering whether, when you're integrating traditional coding with local no-code, to deploy any kind of specific strategies around performance optimization for the solution.
Yeah, so first off, you've got a wonderful gun pointing at your shoulder there, your foot. You can shoot yourself with if you're not careful. So you can low code or pro code, you can go through and make it worse or what you're doing. But for the most part, it really is a performance concern as long as you're not doing nested loops where you're having to do querying something else. Like, give me all the records and in that record go query everything else. That's primarily the number one area I see where, hey, now I'm getting the 4 or 5 seconds and I'm in the actual plugin pipeline itself, so I'm holding up the user. So that's primarily the worst, simplest case of they don't do that. You can also make it asynchronous if you need to, so it's running outside of that, still limited to 2 minutes, but you're not holding up the user. So if you run into that sort of issue, you can do that. Other thing is just to be as efficient as you possibly can. If I was going to use that in a production environment, I'd update that query expression to do a where in and check all 3, potential all 3 email addresses. So I'm not able to do that, but you can do that as well. Generally, I mean, most plugins will run in about, I have to load the first time, that may take more like 200 milliseconds to run, but after that, they're gonna run in the 50 millisecond range. And when you're dealing with a save event that's taking 2 or 3 seconds, you're never gonna notice 50 milliseconds. If you have 10 plugins, you don't ever notice 50 milliseconds. If you're doing a huge data import, that may be the case where you either need to turn off the plugin, or actually in ProCode, you can actually say, hey, make this call and don't run any plugins. So you can do that as well. Sort of things that are involved with the ProCode plugins.
So, what's the framework version that you are targeting here in this studio?
Oh, .NET?
It's 4.6.2, because it doesn't take any restraints.
Correct, yes. Yeah, you are not on the fun .NET Core stuff. You are on the .NET 4.6.2. I am running C# 12 though, so I can get all the language features that I want. It's going to be on .NET 4.6.2 framework until the point where we support .NET Core.
So, if my development machine doesn't have this framework, can I still work it?
Oh, you have to install that first with your Visual Studio. Your Visual Studio, I don't think it comes with default. It used to be like a default thing, but okay, you have to pick it as one of your install frameworks. So it's a good question. I forgot about that. 10 years since I dealt with that. Or I thought about that. Anybody else? Yeah.
How you chose to public system?
Old habits that die hard. So the question is, why did I use the system user? Old habits that die hard. I want to make sure that I see it as being potentially the most performant because it doesn't have to run any additional security rules to remove permissions. It's just going to run at that system level. And in the actual plugin itself, so I use the organization service in here. Yeah. If I want to run under the context of the actual user as a querying the database, then I have an organization service. That's the one that's going to be running in the context of the user. Great. That's strictly.
This is a great one, actually. Would you mind that GitHub repo that you just shared with us?
Yeah, I will give you my card and I will send it to you directly if you want. Because I've already sent off the slides if you want. Yeah, anyone feels free, feel free to connect. Happy to help. That's our contact information there. I'm a Twitter guy, so I'm contacts Twitter, feel free to join the revolution. And if you are on LinkedIn, send me a note. Hey, I saw you at the PowerPoint conference. And if not, I'll send you a copy and paste. Hey, how do I know you? Just so I can know how you send me a message in the year. Like, hey, Daryl, I was working on this and it doesn't work. Hey, how do you do this? I can respond with some context and remember who you are. There is nothing going on here. So I will stay here as long as you want to stay here. So feel free to do that. But if you do need to leave, don't feel like you're hurting my feelings. Go ahead.
What's been your experience with appended assemblies? Is it, I think you've probably done a lot more with it now in the last year or two that they've been around. And I'm just curious.
I have actually only ever used it in productions.
Because everything.
Everyone already existed, you know, I was like, I don't really want to be doing that yet. So I did use the tool that
thoughts on it?
moved all of the plugins over. Because I had like 35, 45 plugins in my assembly. And so that was a really nice plugin set. Moved it all over for me and made a whole migration easier to see this. So once I figured out how to get the build right through the board and dealing with, you don't have to sign it anymore, so it's much easier. But yeah, that is. Who else is here? Various comments, right? Anything else? So they are set up to run both either locally or against the server. I didn't put in my credentials, so right. Yes, it's a mock. Yeah, the XRM test is an in-memory version, as close as I can get it reasonably for that. So it's going to tell what database in there, run the queries, and do that kind of stuff. And it doesn't do anything with like security, just because it's kind of hard to set up a test to say, all right, this user should only have access to these. Like, that'd be really painful to me. So my way of saying, rather than trying to unit test every little thing that way, just test that against the server if you need to. And when it's breaking, you can run it against the server and see if it works or not.
So in your GitHub or your pipeline,
I would not recommend running against it in the Eagle platform, but I guess you could. Yeah, if you're doing a test that way, yeah, sure, you can do that. Let me know if you ever start doing that and you want that to work and it doesn't work, let me know, I'll have you work on that. So, but as many plugins I've created, number 11 parts, things I think I created one project where I actually not only 11 process for this PCB. That's the thing too. I only use the Azure DevOps pipelines. I don't use the GitHub Actions, so I need to do that too. So you need to teach me. Anything else? All right. I'll keep you right after this. This is where I got the question. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just curious. I'm certainly more from the low-code side of the house, if you will.
Yeah.
So like the Allen, C# and all that. But what's your take with like low-code plugins coming to play? PowerFlex expressions. What's your idea for how this kind of pairs with that? How it translates, or if they're still solid purposeful?
Okay. So let's say that we're an analyst that's figuring out. Let's say we're a Ukrainian analyst that's figuring out how do we destroy something on the Russian side of the fence, right? I can take a grenade over on a drone and drop it, and that's $100 grenade, and $100 drone, and $50 grenade. Yeah. Or I can take 5 tanks and go attack it. One is going to be much more likely to get the job done, but it's going to take longer time, or be a lot more. It's a trade-off between time and make it. So really, it's just another tool that hey, this is something super easy. I can do this in all code. Just do it. I have not built a single low-code plugin yet, so I don't know the story around how does it manage when I got 50 plugins. How does it work that way? Because sometimes the low-code world kind of breaks down and it gets to some really complicated stuff that we've got 30 years of pro-code development background that has solved these problems that we don't agree on. So I would say use it when it makes sense, and outside of that, don't. And then you had another question.
Yes, I
So a lot of times, I mean, we've had the same issue before when it comes to like JavaScript on the front end. There's, you can use different actions to do things. If I'm getting kicked out or whatever. We'll see. I'll talk if I do. It matters a lot, like a project and the skill set that we're going to have. If I was on a project where there was no other coders, then yeah, I try to do as much as I can with code. If I'm on a project with a bunch of coders, and they've already got everything set up, they've already paid the price of having that framework set up and that knowledge set. So usually at that point in time, it's easier or quicker to do most things that way, and manage it that way. And as you have more and more complexity, you can usually handle it better appropriately than you can in local. Just because it's not doing more than whatever it was designed to do or what you're striving to do, if that makes sense. I love it.
This very much resonates with the scenario in our department of like fusion teams, like maker projects working
Yep.
together. And so I guess I was just curious with these sorts of setup, does it change how you do documentation when you're like flipping between these two different approaches? And you still need to make sure that there's more than one brain that understands the solution architecture. So how has that impacted how you document individual feature releases and DevOps, but also overall documentation?
I know I'm incredibly good looking, but the problem is I still haven't done low code stuff, low code plugins. But anyway, what I would answer that from my knowledge set is, it will only have to do the difference in the documentation as far as who's the person consuming the documentation. Lots of times if you're on a larger project with developers that have been there for years, or going to be there for years, you can be a little bit more laissez-faire with that because the code should be clean enough that they don't even need to be spending a lot of time updating the documentation, trying to keep it in sync because it's never in sync. And so I have a hard time doing documentation personally because I write code that's clean, I can understand, and I can come back and 2 years later, oh yeah, this is what this is, and pick it up from there. But you have to balance that with the need of the business, so people that aren't coders need to know what this is doing, business analysts need to know how this is working. So it's going to be unique in whatever situation you find yourself in. And so in that sense, I wouldn't imagine being a whole lot different as far as if it's a low-code plugin versus a pro-code plugin, about how you're going to document that. Outside of the fact that maybe if you're dealing with people that are more low-code or are very low-code comfortable, maybe you don't have to spend as much time documenting the details of that because they'll just